My father's focus never has been mine. It was obvious growing up that Caleb, my half-brother, rose and set. 6 years older than me, Caleb is the son of my dad from his first marriage. 2 years ago, after my mother died, life turned from terrible to intolerable. Every little grain of care my dad paid me vanished totally. Let me go back to the start. Sean here, and I just turned 18. Like other kids, I have mediocre marks, a passion for science, and a reserved manner. Though I have never been the center of attention or the outstanding athlete, I have always tried to do right by the people around me. I have done my best to keep my head down and stay out of trouble, even though my dad shows apathy. Mom booted me out of the home 6 months ago. For what reason? Caleb chose to go back home with his kid and wife after job loss. It had no bearing if I was still in high school at the time. To my dad, Caleb's needs came before mine. Never got along, Caleb and I. Though I never had much to start with, he always regarded me as a rival for our dad's attention. Caleb visited every weekend according to their parenting agreement after his mother left when he was a newborn. During such trips, my dad pounced on him, and I was just a shadow in the backdrop. If anything, over time, my dad's apathy grew to be resentment. Unlike Caleb, who was football-oriented, I lacked agility. Though my marks were excellent, I was not top of my class either. None of it mattered to my dad. Strong, charming, and all Caleb had ever dreamed of as a kid, he was the golden child. Caleb made it plain right away that he disliked me. He would treat me like I was beneath him, harass me, and push me around. He insulted me. My dad would dismiss my complaints to him as guys being boys. "Get tough, Sean. You do not wish to grow up soft," he would advise. But Caleb's physical bullying was just one aspect. He changed somewhat as he grew older. He began berating me in front of his pals in middle school. He disseminated rumors that I was mentally impaired, making learning intolerable. Children I knew years before stopped interacting with me, and I turned into a total pariah. Once my haven was school, Caleb destroyed that as well. The years he was gone at college were the only respite. My relationship with my dad was tense throughout that period, but at least Caleb was not breathing down my neck. Then my mother started to feel ill. Her lung cancer news shocked us both, but rather than bringing us closer, it put an even greater gulf between my dad and myself. He poured himself into his job, leaving most of the time me to take care of my mother. I felt as if I had lost both of my parents by the time she went. My dad started drinking when Mom passed away. He seldom paid attention to me except to reprimand me or yell commands about housework. He would lose his cool if I neglected to clean, cook, or maintain the home in operating order. Having nothing else to go on, I avoided arguing. I loathed it, but I kept my head down and went until I could graduate and go off for college. Then Caleb said he would be returning. He cannot afford rent after losing his work in the city. Until they recovered, he and his wife Ashley decided they would return to my dad's home with their kid. My dad did not probe my opinion about it. Rather, he sat me down and said I should start living. The guest room would become a nursery as Caleb and Ashley wanted my room. "You're 17, he remarked. "Although in just a few months I would be 18. You almost qualify as an adult. You have to work out things." Caleb yelled, "Don't question me, Sean." When I inquired why he cannot use the guest room, "More room is needed by Caleb and his family than by you. You are old enough to be on your own." I became enraged. Given only a few weeks of high school remaining, the timing couldn't have been worse, but my objections went unacknowledged. He gave me 2 weeks to pack and go out. Should I not, he threatened to phone the police and have me taken off. I had nowhere legally to turn. I hardly considered if what he was doing at the time was legal at all. Too terrified, I was running around trying to decide where I would go. I finally found myself phoning my maternal grandparents. Although they live far away, their greeting was warm even if getting to school was challenging. I packed and left as fast as I could. My dad hardly said goodbye the day I went. Shortly thereafter, Caleb and Ashley arrived. My dad settled them in without missing a beat. Leaving was comfortable even if it hurt. I lived under another roof than my father or Caleb's for the first time in years. I have been living with my grandparents, completing my last 6 months of high school and getting ready for college. I have not seen my dad or Caleb since either. I believed I could at last leave them behind me and start over, but it was just temporary calm. They came up to my grandparents' place a few days earlier, pleading for my aid and clearly desperate. I nearly failed to identify my father. The self-assured, dominant guy I had grown up with suddenly appeared tired and disorganized. Caleb was not much improved either. Seeing them on my grandparents' porch made me wonder what they could possibly want from me given all this time. Against better knowledge, I chose to hear them out. I had no idea, however, their demand would place me in an untenable situation. Turning 18, I left my home to study in a place far away. It was an opportunity to create my own life separate from the strained dynamic at my father's home. I still traveled over holidays, but as time went on, my travels home became less regular. College seemed freeing, and at last I was in a setting free from the continual background of family conflict where I could concentrate on myself. I began dating fellow student Sophie, who had a fascinating personality and a kind heart, in my sophomore year. Our romance developed rapidly, and before graduation, Sophie was pregnant. Though I was only 22, I felt qualified to go to the front stage. After a little ceremony, we chose to remain in the city where we had lived during college. Early on in our marriage, things were a whirl. Managing a baby, full-time employment, and the transition into adulthood was taxing yet rewarding. While Sophie remained home with our daughter Lily, I had a mid-level administrative job. Though not rich, we managed to make it work. Life seemed steady for some while. I seldom gave my younger half-brother Alex any consideration. I had long ago ceased seeing him as a danger to my relationship with our father, but I didn't try to mend fences either. My family, my work, and creating a life for myself took center stage. In fact, my conversations with Alex confirmed in my thinking that familial ties may be far off, and that was acceptable. My trips to Dad's place dropped over time to a few hours during big holidays. Dad would always be happy to see how I was handling maturity, and wide arms would welcome me. Though our talks were short, I could tell he really cared about my achievement because he loved Lily so much whenever we visited. But when I went, Alex seemed to be seldom around. Whether deliberate or accidental, I wasn't sure, and honestly, I didn't give it much thought. Looking back, I see how little I knew about how my behavior affected other people, though in actuality, I had avoided addressing the emotional fallout from how I handled Alex. At the time, I persuaded myself I had gone on and put the past behind. It was simpler to accept that we had just drifted apart organically than consider the likelihood I had driven him away. My life looked to be headed upward for some time. Together, Sophie and I labored to provide Lily a solid home. We established friends in our neighborhood, leased a modest but comfortable apartment, and worked through the demands of early motherhood together. I considered myself to be in charge, but life often throws curveballs when you least expect them. The stability I had worked so hard to create would soon be challenged, and the choices I made during this period would take me back to my father's home, starting a sequence of events I could never have predicted. I allowed them in, not sure why. Though they did not quarrel, my grandparents were as startled as I was. My dad spoke almost right away. His comments came out in a desperate frenzy. Caleb meekly followed him, staring at the floor like a punished youngster. I couldn't recall the last time any of them looked so hopeless. My dad responded, "We need your help, Sean. It's crucial, Caleb. He made a mistake at work, and right now we both are in hot water. Major problem." I said nothing and let him explain. Thanks to a favor from the CEO, a family friend close to my mom, Caleb had landed a position at the same firm where my dad worked. Though it paid little, it was still something. This was Caleb and Ashley's opportunity to get back on track. They had been battling to make ends meet. Caleb had been pilfering business assets, nevertheless. Not just a small amount either, sufficient to make the loss impossible to ignore. The firm thought my dad could have had a role when the theft was found. They believed he was covering for Caleb, or worse, they were working together. Respect for my mother drove the CEO not to pursue charges yet. He had made it quite clear, however, that the money had to be returned. Should it not be? Caleb and my dad may be subject to criminal prosecution. That's why we're here, Dad said. We need you to, quite naturally, speak with the CEO. Tell them we intended no damage at all. Perhaps claim we borrowed the money for your college fees or another use. Sean, you always appealed to him. If you ask him, he could let us off easy. Stared at him, shocked at my reaction. They intended for me to lie, to cover for Caleb's larceny using my mother's memories and our bond with her buddy. My gut churned at the idea. In 6 months, I had not seen or talked with any of them. Now they were wanting me to tidy their mess. I answered sharply, I cannot do that. The face of my dad collapsed, and Caleb at last spoke out. Please, Sean advised. We could go to prison if we ignore this. I erred, but it was not deliberate. I believed I could pay it back before anybody noticed. I gave my head a shake. You are asking me to tell someone you trusted lies. To someone like Mom, who you trusted. I am unable to do that. You need to own what you did. The look on my dad's face became firm. Sean, our family is... If the positions were reversed, you believe I wouldn't do this for you? I gave a sour chuckle. You threw me out so Caleb could live here. Don't pretend this is about family right now. The suspense in the room seemed stifling. My grandparents intervened when my dad began to quarrel. That's sufficient, my granddad said. Sean has no bearing on correcting this. 2 of you have to go. They departed reluctantly. The guilt persisted, however. I still find myself thinking about their desperation and the likelihood of them winding up in prison even today. Was what I did the correct thing? Alternatively, did my grudges distort my judgment? In any case, going back now is not possible. Going back to Dad's home was meant to be a temporary fix, a stepping stone toward recovery. Once settled there, Dad's contacts helped me get work at a mid-sized corporation. Though it wasn't exactly my ideal job, it would have helped my family start paying off some of our debt. Though I felt the unstated demands that accompanied his support, Dad had personally vouchsafed for me, and I was appreciative. This year, the home felt different. One could clearly see Alex missing. His room had been empty, and I found out he had moved into a little apartment in town. Alex should be independent, Dad argued, but I knew better. Alex had been driven out to create room for my family and myself. Though I reasoned it away, part of me felt guilty. I needed assistance after all, and Alex was old enough to be on his own. One had difficult work, the salary was not very good, and our financial difficulties did not resolve as rapidly as I had thought. Providing for Sophie and Lily, paying back debt, and now attempting to live up to the faith Dad had in me at his friend's firm was weighing on me. The tension started to affect me not too long ago, and I started acting poorly. One day, confronted with an overdue payment and no quick fix, I took an action I will always regret. Promising myself I would pay it back as soon as my finances steadied, I borrowed a little sum from the company's records. Still, the financial pressure persisted during the next few weeks. The little I had taken developed into considerably more, and soon I was in above my reach. Though secrets have a way of unraveling, I felt I was being cautious. The disparities were discovered during a regular audit. Not long thereafter, the truth emerged. Furious but ready to avoid legal action if I paid the whole back off, the firm approached me. Not only was my reputation online, but Dad's name was also pulled into the situation. Dad had the guilt of having recommended me, and his buddy, who ran the business, was rather let down. Desperate, I looked to Dad for support. Though his want to shield me overrode his wrath, he was outraged. We discussed every conceivable way to pay back the money and save what remained of my reputation. The total was notable, far beyond what any of us could readily collect. Dad advised them that we get in touch with Alex. I will confess that I did not want to do it. Getting Alex to assist seemed embarrassing, given our past. Dad, however, felt Alex could help because he had enough savings from his employment. Reluctantly, I accepted, even though I had low expectations. Since I moved back, Alex and I hadn't talked much, and the few uncomfortable exchanges we had were short. Alex had tightness in his eyes as we sat down. Dad spoke most of the time, outlining the circumstances and offering a strategy. We would let the business know the money had been spent for Alex's schooling costs. Although it was a falsehood, Dad said it was a means of preventing further harm to the standing of our family. All Alex had to do was verify the narrative and provide some money assistance to aid with part of the payback. Alex said no without a second thought. His voice was cool but forceful, and his comments struck harder than I had anticipated. "I'm not going to lie for you," he said. "You made this mess. You have to own it." He shot a stern glare at Dad. "And you cover for him no matter what he does. Perhaps it is time you quit." Reminding him that we were family, I attempted to gently persuade him, but he was unconverted. He said, "Family?" His voice tainted with resentment. "Derek, you never treated me like family. You shoved me about, treated me as if I was not important, and now you expect me to tidy your mess? Not sure." I have finished. Although stinging, his comments were fair. I had never really thought about how my behavior had changed Alex over the years. To him, my need for assistance must have sounded like just another episode in a protracted history of selfishness. Dad attempted to argue with Alex, but the conversation was obviously over. Alex turned to leave us to handle the aftermath on our own. Dad was quite quiet on the way home, not just by Alex's rejection, but also by the knowledge that he had helped to create the distance between us. I could tell he was wounded. Stress and annoyance dominated the following 3 days. Although Sophie was encouraging, I could also sense the difficulty this was causing her. Dad attempted to get in touch with Alex once more, but his calls went off. The management of the firm set a deadline for us to pay back the money, and as the clock ran down, I felt the weight of my errors crushing down on me. Deep down, I knew Alex was correct. Assuming familial connections would always keep us together no matter how badly I treated him, I had spent years taking without giving. Now I was paying for that attitude, and it affected not just my relationship with Alex, but also my honesty, reputation, and confidence among others. I began to question if I had burnt too many bridges to ever set things right, or if there was any way I may undo this. The future was hazy, and for the first time in my life, I saw no obvious road ahead. Alex's unwillingness to assist left me struggling with a flurry of emotions: anger, remorse, humiliation, and a deep feeling of powerlessness. The next several days were among the worst I have ever gone through. That chat. My actions had great weight, and for the first time I had to really accept the harm I had done to everyone around me as well as myself. The day to pay back the firm loomed over us like a thundercloud. Dad and I searched for a way, but nothing would have covered my debt. Sophie advised selling some of our stuff, and while it would have helped a bit, it was not quite sufficient. Every night, I gazed at the ceiling and ran through many conceivable escape routes from the mess, only to come up short. Dad was quieter than usual during this period. His customary assurance gave way to a clear fatigue. Knowing I had placed him in this situation made me sick, as I could see my actions had also affected him. I didn't deserve his relentless allegiance to me, even after everything, yet I couldn't force myself to turn away either. It let me understand how much Dad had given me over the years, and how little I had given back. Alex's comments kept coming back to me in the meantime. The recollection of his strict, uncompromising attitude when he turned away aid would not go away. It was the reality underlying his words, not just the rejection stinging. For years, I had mistreated him, writing him off as nothing more than a tool and neglecting his individuality with regard to his own emotions and challenges. Now I dared to beg for his support when I most needed it. Looking back, I couldn't fault him for leaving. Without any workable answers, I decided I had to face the problem squarely. I asked for a meeting by phoning the manager of the company, a friend of my late stepmother. Against my objections, Dad persisted in accompanying me. Though he disapproved of my behavior, I believe he wanted to indicate he still supported me. Among the most embarrassing events of my life was that conference. I said a lot of apologies and took all responsibility for what I had done. Promising to put things right, whatever the length of time, I described my financial condition and requested extra time to pay back the money. Quietly listening, the manager had an unclear look. "You have placed me in a very difficult position, Derek," she remarked at last. "You have not only broken that confidence, but also compromised the integrity of the business, as I accepted your father's word when he suggested you. I would be ready to extend you, but only under very tight guidelines. Though tough, the circumstances were fair. I had to pay back the whole sum within 6 months, and there was no chance for further forgiveness. I would also have to give my job instant resignation. Though not perfect, it was better than running afoul of legal action. Knowing I had no other option, I readily agreed to the stipulations. Out of the conference, I felt both relief and anxiety. Legal repercussions were not an imminent concern, but the path ahead seemed difficult. While jobless and yet attempting to maintain my family, I had 6 months to save a significant sum of money. After the conference, Dad and I sat in the vehicle quietly for some time. At last he spoke out against the quiet. "You're lucky they're giving you a chance," he continued, his voice weighed with sadness. "But this is Derek. Not sure. You must address this. Shortcuts are not here to stay." "I know," I said softly. "I'll correct things." That evening, I spoke with Sophie for a long time. Though I could sense the hardship it was causing her, She had been my rock during this process. She deserved more than the anarchy I had brought into our life. Though that was a last resort, we discussed our alternatives: downsizing, selling more stuff, even asking her parents for a loan. "I'll support you, Derek," Sophie responded, her voice firm even though she was crying. "But you have to swear to me this is the last time. There are no more falsehoods or poor choices. We have to go about this correctly." I promised, and for the first time in a very long time, I meant it. The following few weeks were a haze of job applications, side projects, and challenging dialogues. I asked for a job, guidance, anything that would assist, swallowing my pride and contacting folks I hadn't seen in years. Though it was embarrassing, it was very vital. Fixing my errors required more than simply returning the money. It also meant regaining trust and demonstrating to others and myself that I could change. I started thinking more about my connection with Alex at this time as well. I considered getting in touch once again, not seeking assistance but rather apologizing. Though I knew it wouldn't reverse the years of torture, it seemed like a required first step toward recovery. Still, each time I took up the phone, I paused. Part of me questioned whether I really earned his pardon. Another part of me worried he wouldn't even pick up. The months passed, and I began to gradually improve. It wasn't easy, and there were days when I wanted to give up. Nevertheless, the idea of disappointing my family motivated me on those days. I was owning my actions and striving for a future I could be happy about for the first time in my life. Notwithstanding the difficulties, I started to glimpse optimism, little successes, landing a freelancing job, selling enough goods to pay a bill, receiving a call back for an interview, reminded me that change was doable. Though it was not the life I had imagined, it was a positive path, and I couldn't get rid of the idea that maybe, just maybe, it was still possible to mend my connection with Alex too, while I fought to reconstruct my life. The 6-month deadline passed without any difficulty. Working odd jobs, cutting down spending, and selling off everything of worth had taken every free minute. I paid back the money I owed the firm with Sophie's assistance and tenacity. Though it was great, the relief was mixed. What I had gained in freedom, I had lost in pride and confidence. Still, my faults no longer were weighing me down. I could start breathing once again. The relief did not clear the damage I left behind. Still close, my connection with Dad seemed strained. He had always been my safety net, and while he never said it clearly, I knew this experience had caused him to doubt if he had helped to justify my bad choices. Ever the tenacious friend, Sophie stayed by me. Although I could see her eyes were tired, she had carried so much of the weight. One day I promised to make things right for her, but Alex was the one person on my mind most often. I wrestled for months with whether I should attempt to get back in touch with him. Part of me wants to let sleeping dogs lie, to go on and bid the past goodbye. Another side of me, however, became louder with every day, realizing that ignoring the problem would not make it go away. I couldn't go ahead without at least attempting to atone, because I had offended Alex in ways I was just starting to really grasp. One evening, then, I sat down and wrote him a note. I kept it honest and straightforward. "Alex, though I wanted to apologize, I knew I was most likely the last person you wanted to hear from. I know I wasn't the brother you deserved, and I have been considering my treatment of you growing up a lot lately. Though I cannot turn back the past, I want you to know I regret the way I behaved and how it impacted you. If you are game, I would like to meet and discuss. Should not be the case, I know. In any case, I hope for the best." Before I could second-guess it, I delivered the message and waited impatiently for a reply. Days stretched out from hours, and my phone rang just when I started to doubt I would get back off. Alex came first. Though brief, the message was not a rejection. "Fine, come see me." Saturday, we decided to get together at the town's coffee shop, midway between his apartment and Dad's home. As soon as I stepped through the door and saw him seated at a table near the window, the jitters attacked. Less guarded than I had recalled, he seemed older and more assured. He clearly had become his own person, someone not needing my approval or affirmation. Though it pained, that awareness also made me feel oddly proud. I took a seat. For a minute, neither of us said anything. At last, I spoke out against the hush. "Thanks for showing up." Alex nodded with a blank look. "What are you going to say?" I drew in a long breath. "I apologize. For everything. for the way I treated you growing up, for running the home when I moved back, for asking you to lie for me. I was immature and self-serving. I never paused to consider how my behavior impacted you. Though I wanted to tell you I'm trying to be better, I don't expect you to forgive me." Alex observed me for a minute, his expression inscrutable. Then, shockingly, he groaned and slanted back in his chair. "You know, Derek, I spent a lot of time resentful of you. After some time, however, I came to see that clinging to that resentment was not serving me. I moved on and am doing well right now." "I'm glad to hear that," I answered, really relieved. "You are entitled to be happy." "I do," he replied with great conviction. "But just because you apologized, I'm not going to pretend everything's great between us. It will need work as well as time. You will have to show you changed if you want to correct this." I nodded to indicate I understood. "I will do whatever it takes." After that, we spoke for some time, largely on surface-level concerns: his employment, my attempts to reconstruct my life, and how Sophie and Lily were doing. It was a beginning rather than an emotional reunion or a broad act of pardon. I had a flutter of optimism that, given time, we may reconstruct something like a relationship after we separated ways. I considered how differently things may have been if I had handled Alex with compassion from the start as I returned to my vehicle. Though I could not turn back the past, I could own my acts and strive to be the brother and the person I wanted to be. I made a point of keeping in contact with Alex in the next months, but I did not press. I let him determine the speed and respected his limits. Between us, slowly things started to thaw. We began getting together periodically, and while it was obvious there was still a long way to go, I appreciated the opportunity to try. I concentrated on atoning with Sophie and parenting Lily properly at home, not by contacts, but rather by diligence and tenacity. I landed a new position and started to reconstruct my career from the bottom up. Though the path ahead was not simple, the event had humbled me in ways I never would have anticipated and motivated me more than ever to show my family and myself I could do better. Lessons in life often find you when you least expect them. The most important lesson, for me, was this: family is about respect, trust, and work, not just about blood. Though I had failed Alex in many respects, I refused to let that define our relationship always. Though it would take time, I was ready to invest the effort. Alex was ultimately correct in the end of the matter. It was time to start facing the consequences of my choices, instead of continuing to choose the easy path out. And I was prepared to do just that for the first time in my life.